Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Pare Center. Today, we begin our new online series, The Future Mind. Throughout 2022, our director, Àlex Gómez-Marín, initiated the Future Scientist Conversation series, a monthly virtual encounter to understand where science is going and to reimagine where we hope it might go. Maintaining the spirit and format in 2023, the series expanded its scope and morphed into The Future Human. Now, in 2024, Àlex will continue to curate and host such conversations to address the future mind, seeking to gain clarity and insight into important contemporary matters that require both urgent action as well as deep reflection. The conversation will explore a landscape of consciousness toward a taxonomy of explanations and implications. Today, we welcome the first guest in this series, Dr. Robert Lawrence Kuhn, the creator, writer, host, and executive producer of Closer to Truth, the long-running PBS public television series, and leading global resource on cosmos, consciousness, life, and meaning. Dr. Kuhn has written or edited over 30 books, is an international corporate strategist and investment banker, and is the recipient of the China Reform Friendship Medal. Àlex Gómez-Marín is a Spanish physicist turned neuroscientist. His research spans from the origins of the hour of time to the neurobiology of action perception across species, from flies and worms to mice and humans. Since 2016, he has been the head of the Behavior of Organisms Laboratory at the Instituto de Neurociencias in Alicante, where he is an associate professor of the Spanish Research Council. Combining computational biology and continental philosophy, his current research concentrates on consciousness in the real world. I will now hand the conversation over to Àlex.
All right, I can't wait to start. Thank you very much, Michael. Well, I'm delighted to be here again. 24 conversations so far. I know I change the name of the series every year. It feels fresh. And so delighted. I feel blessed actually to be able to start this year with Robert. He's been talking to so many fascinating people, and today I have the chance to talk to him. So let's go. Thank you very much for accepting our invitation. And
a pleasure, Àlex. Pleasure to be here and to talk together. We are kindred spirits, and we must have a lot of codons in common.
And we discovered it recently. This is another fascinating thing behind the scenes that maybe people don't know. But of course, I find people I would love to talk to. I approach them. I approached you. Then we had this back and forth, and you shared some stuff. I shared some stuff. And even before talking, we've been having a lot of correspondence. And, you know, it feels like we've been working together for a long time, but it's just been recently, just because of the opportunity to talk to you, other things are opening up. So yeah, it's a double blessing. So much to talk about. Let's start with this. Are we getting closer to truth?
Well, let me tell you the story of Closer to Truth. My doctorate, my PhD was in neurophysiology, and the idea of studying the brain and the mind and understanding consciousness has been really a lifelong passion. But I didn't make it a career. After I did my doctorate, I did many other things in business, was at MIT and did a Sloan Fellowship as well as teaching brain science, and then did a lot of stuff in the business world and mergers and acquisitions, a whole other incarnation. But the core essence of what I wanted to do always had to do with understanding the nature of reality. I remember even as a high school student deciding which way would I go, to brain science or physics and philosophy, two different. Of course, you've done now both. And so that was a choice, how best to understand reality. And I came to the view that there's no ideal way, but the brain is how we know reality, and it's a vehicle to learn a lot about different kinds of sciences. So that seemed to me a way to really understand one approach to the nature of reality. But over the years, over the decades, as I was doing various things in business, I had the sense that when I retire, I was going to focus on what would become Closer to Truth. I didn't have that name at that point. And then around in the mid 1990s, I realized I'm never going to retire. And so if I'm going to do something, I better start doing it now, as difficult as it was given my other kinds of responsibilities. And so I began to think about how to build, at that point, TV was the only vehicle. Obviously, the internet was just in its rudimentary stages. And so I began exploring it, and I had the idea of a show that would be called MindQuest, which was a way to understand what it is and talk to many people, and too complicated, not interested. And then one head of a small PBS station liked the idea, but he didn't like that title. It seemed too, I don't know, new agey or who knows what. And he said, well, tell me what it's about. And I said, we have a subtitle for MindQuest. And he said, and the subtitle, this is the closest you'll get to truth. And he said, that's the title. Forget the MindQuest stuff. Take your subtitles. That's what it's about. The closest to the truth. And then I suddenly said, I can't say the truth because that's not what I can do. But let's take the out and closer to truth. And that's the way it started, literally in a 30-second interaction. His name was Mel Rogers. He was head of, at that point, KOCE, which is now the main PBS station in Southern California, PBS SoCal. And the concept of taking out the is actually very significant to what Closer to Truth is all about. Obviously, we get hundreds of thousands of comments, and people often misstate the title, Closer to the Truth. And as I respond as I can, I always make the point that it's not the truth, because it's present progressive. It's a process. We don't claim to know the truth. Some people criticize Closer to Truth because on our television shows, we almost never come to a conclusion. At the end, we don't have a point of view. We give the diverse points of view. We do our very best to curate the different ways of thinking in areas of cosmos, which is physics, mathematics, cosmology is the main thing, but also the philosophy of science, science and religion, all of that in cosmos. Consciousness, of course, everything having to do with the brain, mind, philosophy of mind. We deal with personal identity, free will, alien intelligences, diverse intelligence. Meaning is the third category that we had, and that's all encompassing regarding the possibility of purpose and meaning, value, if any, dealing with philosophy of religion, not sectarian religion, not sociology of religion, but the deep philosophy of religion. Philosophical theology has been an aspect. We're now expanding that, which I'm very pleased, into a global philosophy of religion, which has been our focus in the last 2 years. In production, we just started to broadcast, and it'll be on our web, on our YouTube channel, in terms of a really deep understanding of the ontological and epistemological issues coming out of Hinduism and Buddhism, Chinese religion, Confucianism and Taoism. It's less in there, but really exploring in depth. Previously, we had a Judeo-Christian focus with some Islam. We've already, and we're significantly emphasizing Islam as well in the new incarnation. So those have been the three. We just added a fourth category called life. We have a major series on philosophy of biology, which I'm very excited about. It's just started. It's a major, probably 13 PBS shows and literally 250 videos with the founders of the field in philosophy of biology. So that will be the fourth category. We argued, where should it fit? We had cosmos, consciousness, and meaning. So where does life go? And many people wanted to put it after consciousness, which is a statement about the nature of consciousness, that it's more fundamental. Other people would say consciousness, cosmos, life, meaning, but we're putting life after cosmos. So cosmos, life, consciousness, meaning. One can discuss all of that. So that's the origin of Closer to Truth. Since the advent, obviously, of the web and YouTube, that has become actually our primary distribution. We're getting close to 600,000 subscribers. We just hit 590, and it's really been a very exciting adventure. Let me just conclude my feeling for Closer to Truth with one additional thought. My focus for my whole life, and certainly for the 25 years we've been working on Closer to Truth, has been entirely content oriented. I didn't think anything about, who the participants are, no thought of diversity, of anything other than diversity of ideas and the best thinkers, a real diversity of ideas. So we have radically different points of view, but it was not, I didn't think about geography or anything like that. We've been more sensitive to that in recent years, but here's the point. As we've developed on YouTube and on the web, it used to be 100% US because it was driven by PBS, which is only in the US. It gets into Canada too, so Canada was there as well. But since then, worldwide has been increasing substantially, so that now US is less than half. It's about 42, 43%, and the rest of the world. And we see a tremendous interest in the Islamic world. We have many people who subscribe and are fervent participants from Iran and Turkey and Suriname. I mean, it's really every country, and it's given me a sense that the kinds of questions that we ask, and you, Alex, deal with, are universal questions, and they supersede all issues of religion and race and national conflicts and age or social standing or economic standing or gender. All of these things kind of blend away because people have this interest in these fundamental ideas. Major topic we deal with is why there's something rather than nothing, which has been probably along with consciousness, our sort of primary theme. And to see so many people in the world gathering around these ideas without any other interest is, to me, a very minor contribution to the world, but it is something. And as we see the world today, I think it's more needed than ever.
I absolutely subscribe to everything you've said, and there's so many resonances with what we do in PARI and the themes, the big themes, and these arcs, including meaning, which we call the sacred. And it's so important that we have the courage and the humility to address them exactly as you were saying. Another aspect that's so relevant to me, looking at your work, is the pluralism, but also the curation. I'd like to hear more about the process of curating, choosing how to show and who to show, and also the comprehensive aspect of the hundreds, if not thousands, of people with whom you've talked. And another thing that's so difficult, and it's even more today, how to navigate this tight line between open-mindedness and new ideas and also rigor. And, if you bend towards one side, then of course you get complaints, and one can complain to oneself, well, next time I should tighten up the rigor part. But if you're too rigorous, then it becomes kind of, in a way, boring and predictable. And so this is a whole art. Tell us a bit more about how you navigate that. It's the art of curation.
It's a great question. And the first answer is I don't think about that at all. I just do what I feel instinctively. And it's not just from myself. I mean, I get a lot of feedback from a lot of people, including you, which I very much respect. And that it begins to be a positive feedback circle. So the more we do it, the more people write, the more information that we have. But let me tell you my favorite story. The way I can describe it is that we had and this has happened several times. We have 2,500 videos now on YouTube. We have about 5,000 in our collection. They're short. They're 8 to 10 minutes. And we have something like 320 full TV shows, which are 30 minutes, 26, 27 minutes, very, very tightly scripted and recorded. So we have two different aspects of content. One is the raw videos, which are cleaned up only if there's technical. And if I make a mistake or guests make a mistake, generally we let that go. It's a very raw sense of the topic. And again, we have about 5,000 of those. The second are these highly curated, highly structured television shows where we'll take a topic like why is there something rather than nothing, which we've done many shows on, and have an architectural flow of generally minimum of 4, maximum 6, generally 5 or so people that will give diverse points of view. And in this regard, the co-creator of Closer to Truth is Peter Getzels, who's the director and producer. And it's really extraordinarily the amount of work that goes into producing it, not just the on-site filming, but then all the post-production, which sometimes for the television show can take a year or more in terms of scripting and back and forth and VOs and putting in music and creating that arc. And so those television shows are our crown jewel that we work very hard on. And I don't think I've ever come to a firm conclusion on any of them, but will articulate the issues and have worked very hard to be sure that each of the major points of view are represented in the best way by the best people. Now, let me go back and tell you what my favorite comment was. We have all these up. And so there's several videos in which, there might be, I don't know, 500 comments. And I sometimes skim through it. I wish I could do it more, but I don't. And I read one comment that said, this has been a great show. I appreciate it. But Kuhn is really a closet atheist, and he's trying to undermine the belief of people who have a spiritual or sacred understanding. He's an atheist materialist, and he's great. We love it, but everybody should beware. And then about 20 comments later, somebody said, this is terrific, but Kuhn is a closet theist. And he's trying to convert very subtly those people into a religious belief. And that was into the same video. So I thought that was a sign of success.
Well, indeed, because this is another virtue that I see in your work, which is that rather than, and you do obtain answers, but rather than go for answers and then in a way bias it towards, okay, now let's pick what seems like the best answer. You offer higher quality questions and hold all those answers out there. And so it's a very difficult, it's like, if I can use a cheap analogy, but it's like the wave function, people want it to collapse, people want, okay, but ask the question and let's figure it out. Like, what's the answer and what's the best answer and who wins? And you don't do that. And your guests also, I think, understand it. And what you have in the end is more wondering about the nature of reality.
People ask me after 25 years of doing that, are you, meaning me, closer to truth? And I give an honest answer, and I say, what I can honestly say is I understand the questions and the issues and the subtleties far better than I ever have. But if you're asking me, do I have greater confidence in whatever my personal disposition may be at the moment, the answer is no. But I deeply understand the questions, and I deeply understand the diverse answers to it, and have a pretty good sense of I'm not going to say the best thinkers in the world, because there are constantly people that we want to talk to that are more, but a very good subset collection on each of the major issues. Now, we're very tightly focused on these 4 topics. We don't deal with, politics or healthcare, all sorts of things that we'd be very much non-experts in. But in these topics, we really have a deep sense of the major thinkers in the world, the diverse opinions, and the rich substantive nature of the questions. And to me, that's very satisfying. I've told people, they really push, what's your opinion? What's your opinion? Personally. And I said, it doesn't matter what my opinion is, because when I talk to somebody, I'm trying to get the best thinking out of that person. So people, if they just see that, they may think I'm antagonistic to that point of view, be it theistic or atheistic, whatever it is. But that's not the case. I'm trying to get the best thinking out of that person. And I'm doing it not as a, kind of a television thing. I'm doing it because I really am interested. I
Yes.
really want to get the best thinking from that person. And so I ask the kinds of questions that are natural, that flow, and that bring out the best thinking, as opposed to just letting them talk. And so that process has been very rewarding to me. The second point I make is that even if I have an opinion myself privately, I don't really trust it. If I had a mystical experience, I would not trust that as a vehicle. People tell me, I should take psychedelics to improve my way of seeing things. To me, that is not something that is exciting to me. Maybe I should do it for just for the fun of it. But I want to really deeply understand the nature of the questions. That's a criticism that we have, that we are more analytic and less experiential. And I say, I'm not saying our way is the only way of accessing knowledge, an analytic approach. It's not, I'm not saying that. I'm saying it's the only thing that I can do that gives me a certain degree of confidence in understanding the nature. I'm much less able to curate an experiential view of meaning or some of these other topics where it would be relevant. I'm not able to give the confidence in a curation. Who should I give and who should it wouldn't? It's much vague. I'm not excluding that as a way of knowing. I'm not. I'm just saying that's not where I think I can provide a high level of confidence that what you're getting is the best collection of Closer to Truth. So we try to be very humble about what we do, and in terms of understanding, but to deeply understand the questions and to see the reaction of many people from all these diverse cultures and religions coming together over these things is very exciting for us.
You're reading my mind as you're telling me this. It's like we're in the flow, because I wanted to ask you precisely about this. So here we have the analytic level, the intellect, and you've been poking at all those deluxe thinkers. Now, in doing so, don't you sometimes feel or see that there's perhaps a level underneath, which is the feeling, the emotional level, where these people are coming from in terms of the ideas that they sustain or they proclaim, and another level perhaps above, when you can see, well, there's something that's not analytical here. It's intuitive. It has to do with a higher order, sorry, of meaning or of knowledge. And this thing is perhaps being conveyed through the intellect, but in any case, it comes from up there. And in that sense, I wonder why, and of course, you're absolutely free to do whatever you want, but why don't you bring more, precisely, I was going to ask you, more mystics, poets, dancers? Don't you think we can get even closer? It could be like even closer to truth, talking to those people, and finding in all those great analytical intellects these upper and lower levels that are obviously there and doing their job.
Look, all good questions. Let me answer a different question, but it speaks to the same point. We have over the years I've interviewed, and many of these are in great depth over half a day, 4 or 5 hours, over 500 people over this period of time. And I've probably invited 700, 800, and logistics and difficulties. We have very tight logistics and complexities. So most people who we haven't invited wanted to come, but we weren't able to arrange it. There have been a handful, literally a handful, 4 or 5, who refused. And a couple of them refused because they don't feel comfortable in front of a camera. They're very very articulate in their writing. They're very famous people. And one person told me, he said, I'll help you as much as I can, but I'd have to read a script on camera. I wouldn't be able to just talk. He gave me a compliment. He said, of all the interview requests he's had in his whole lifetime, he never came closer to say yes than to Closer to Truth, but he's still going to say no. So I took that as a compliment. But here's the point. One of those persons who refused to do it was a person who didn't think in any way that that this person, and I'm going to use without, I don't want to necessarily identify her, but as a very famous woman who didn't think she'd be able to communicate as she does in her beautiful writings. And finally, I don't know how I did it, but I trapped her into doing it where she had to do it. She was close by and she had to do it, did it reluctantly. And what happened was she was fabulous on camera. And what she told me over the years, we've now become great friends. She told me over the years that she's gotten more impact from these 8-9 minute videos of, fairly simple exposition compared to her multiple books of 500 pages, that it shocked her how much impact it has. And the reason it does, I mean, she's very good, but the reason it does speaks to your point, Àlex, because it speaks to the point that there is a communication factor between a human being and seeing that person, and it's more than the words, because if you look at the transcript of anything, somebody takes a transcript of what you and I are talking about and we put it on paper, it's not publishable because it doesn't make beautiful sentence and structure. When I did a transcript on some of the shows, we had to spend hundreds of hours editing the transcript to make it coherent. But what you have is this human communication, and that human communication, I think, speaks to your point that there is something about a human being beyond the analytic, and the analytic can be put in a book. But when we talk about it together, we have this communication. Now, I'm not saying I can analyze that communication, and I'm not sure I want to move towards interviewing mystics. I would love to do that. My wife's a classical concert pianist, and I love music and understand all of that. I'm just not sure if that is where we can make the best contribution. I do think that there are areas, and as I said, what I'm most excited about now is this global philosophy of religion, which was initiated by a wonderful philosopher, Yuji Nagasawa, who was at the University of Birmingham, and we did this collaboration, big project on global philosophy of religion and process. He's now at University of Oklahoma in a chaired position, a wonderful, remarkable philosopher, absolutely unique in the world. He's Japanese by birth, did his undergraduate in mathematics in the United States, Stony Brook, did his PhD in Australia, was a top professor in the UK and head of the UK Science and Religion, did a lot of editing for Cambridge and Oxford, and now is in Oklahoma. So he's a remarkable fellow. But he has promoted the global philosophy of religion, and we're partners in creating that. And I think that gives me comfort, because we're talking, for example, to two Hindu swamis that both come from the Advaita Vedanta tradition, but very different points of view. One has a PhD in German idealism from Berkeley, as well as being a Hindu monk. The other is one of, I'd say, Hindu's greatest expositions, and they are brilliant in their way. And they fit perfectly the Closer to Truth model, because they are explaining from an analytical way of thinking the deep underlying mystery. So I'm very comfortable doing that. But to just speak to someone who is a mystic, probably at this point would be outside our orbit.
Is there a sense of urgency in this project you're telling us about, in the sense that all the questions you address, you could think of them as perennial? These are the questions human beings always had and will always have. And at the same time, I suppose you're aware of civilization and the state we are in, and I don't want to be too apocalyptic about it, but is there a sense of urgency that drives somehow these new questions, for instance, about religion, as opposed to others?
I start again with the whole motivation of Closer to Truth is not eleemosynary. I'm not doing it for the world. I can't tell you I have these altruistic contributional motives. In a sense, it started very self-centered. These are questions that I love. I love doing this. Somebody asked me, why do you do Closer to Truth? Obviously, I've never been paid. I have funded it in the early years, 100%. Fortunately, I had this hobby on the side called investment banking, and that provided the funds for my real profession, which nobody pays me for. I have to support. But people ask me why you do it, and I remember answering spontaneously, I cannot not do it. And that's the only answer I can give. It's something that I deeply want to do. Now, having said that, as the original, I've now seen, particularly in the last, I don't know, 3-4 years, this global interest, and it really has changed my way of thinking to where it is not something that's, oh, nice and incidental, but something that is more serious. And I take that more seriously now as an opportunity that we have, perhaps uniquely, to deal with these perennial questions that everyone has, and that it is part of the human endeavor to deal with them, to experience them. Now, not everybody feels that way, but the people who do are this community that is truly worldwide, from every ethnic group possible. And these questions to those people supersede all the differences. And to me, that's an exciting opportunity, and even a revelation about humanity. And so it's not there's no messianic thoughts here, but it's just an appreciation of what we are. And the more we can address these kinds of questions as a global interest, I think the better we will be able to address some of the great conundrums that we face in the world.
A really good illustration of this approach, and a timely one, is this landscape of consciousness you've been working on that I discovered recently. And it speaks to, I think, what academia could become, in the sense that, and you can describe it in a minute, you've laid out as many theories of consciousness out there and arranged a taxonomy that provides really an overview. Also, you can go and look at the particular trees, but now we can see the forest, or even different forests, the materialist forest, the panpsychist forest, and so on. And again, it's so easy to say, no, I mean, these are the 2 that matter, or these are the 4 that matter, or these are the, well, you address the diversity and the granularity without losing the bigger picture. And well, I'd like you to tell us more about this work, because I think it's going to be really healthy to the community, and you dare to have on the same piece like the superstars with the weird guys that also made contributions, and who knows, maybe they are going to be the superstars of the future. So thank you for that, and tell our audience more about it, because I know, but they may not know.
Well, look, Alex, I appreciate you bringing it up. This has been my passion for almost the last year. When I look at any topic, the first thing I like to do is to understand the universe. What is the totality of the ideas? This is something I've done almost intuitively my whole intellectual life. I started actually with nothing, in the question of why is there something rather than nothing. And of all the millions of words I've written, one of my favorite articles is called, you look it up on the web or closer to the website, it's called Levels of Nothing. And what it describes is, because when I wanted to understand that question, I worked, by the way, with the great philosopher John Leslie. We have the book, I think it's up here. I don't know if you can see it, The Mystery of Existence. And I learned a lot from John. He has his own particular views about value, which I may not agree with, but as a philosopher, first rate. But when I wanted to understand nothing, I wanted to understand what that word means. So I developed a taxonomy of nothing, which had 9 levels of nothing. And I won't go into it, but the 5th level of nothing is what quantum physicists call nothing, which is, you know, before the quantum foam kind of spontaneously erupted, there was nothing, and now the universe formed out of nothing. So that's level 5. I have 4 levels of nothing below that. And so that gave me some good sense, called levels of nothing. It's you can find it again on Closer to Truth. And it was short. And so that I really enjoyed that. And then I understood, and that gave me the vehicle to do many television shows on why is there something rather than nothing? Why not nothing? Why is there anything at all? Those kinds of issues with all different points of view. Coming to consciousness, which has been my lifelong interest, obviously from my pre-doctoral and teenager. I hadn't done that. But but in the back of my mind, I've been doing it sort of not analytically in an organized way, but just doing literally hundreds and maybe 1,500 videos on consciousness in different forms and developing it. But I never did it systematically. And then, to give credit, a first-rate journal, the Journal of called Progress in Biophysics and Molecular Biology, is planning to do an issue on quantum consciousness in that very specific way. And they asked me to write an introductory article for that issue about consciousness. And I hesitated because I knew that if I get into it, I'd have to do it well. And I hesitated for a while. And finally, I agreed to do it. And I had no idea what I was getting into when I said that. And as it developed, I won't bore you with the process. It has become a life obsession. And I tell your great audience and the world that you've been a tremendous help in this process. I mean, you reached out to me for this show, and I told you what I was doing, and in this process, you've been a great help in helping kind of make a super graphic that people will see in the future when the final article is up that you've done, and we've worked together on it. So it's been a great joy to have you as a resource to bounce some of these ideas off as well. And so what I wanted to do was to be as comprehensive as possible, to lay out the whole landscape of all the different ideas. Now, as I started, I had I had some good knowledge of materialistic theories, and I had my first thing. And as I developed it iteratively and fed back to some of the people, and most of the people I worked with were on Closer to Truth. So I knew them, I could send them stuff, their stuff. They helped me organize their stuff, edited their own material, and also suggested other people. So that began to grow. So it began to grow more than just people on Closer to Truth, people I wanted to have that we haven't, and it's become very comprehensive. But what was important to me also was to present the ideas that are outside the traditional scientific mainstream of thinking, not just outside materialistic theories, like quantum theories, which this issue would be, but broader issues in the philosophical world, like panpsychism. But beyond that, to some of the religious traditions that have very strong interests, like what I said from the Vedas and the Hindu tradition, with some of the most sophisticated ways of thinking about consciousness in a very rich and profound way. And so I began building that into this article in terms of under idealism, because the consciousness is the primary thing, and really fleshing it out from the Hebrew Bible, the Christian beliefs, Islamic beliefs, the Hindu, Buddhism, and then indigenous religions in South America and Africa. They're thinking about consciousness, and this became a rich section. And during the first peer review, the peer reviewer, said, liked the article, obviously, it was accepted, gave some very good suggestions in materialistic theories I'd not considered. So that was very helpful in the second round. But questioned, they said, will, molecular biologists be interested in reading 30 pages on, Hindu idealism? And he said, I don't really think so. And in my comments back, I said, you're probably right, but I can't do it any other way. Either I'm going to include everything from my point of view, which will include these diverse religious, certainly philosophical things, or I'm not going to do it at all. And you've gotten me on where I'm doing this and I'm going to publish it someplace. And I'd love to publish it with you because it was your idea, but I have to include these other areas. And to their credit, they accepted that. And so the article, The Landscape of Consciousness, it's actually been published, but it's an older form of the article. I didn't expect it to be published, but it will be updated within 4 to 6 weeks, I hope, or 8 weeks, with the final article, which will be very different and will include the great graphic that you've created, so people can look forward to that. But it is important for me to lay out this total landscape. Now, because of our limitations, it's a one-dimensional thing, so it's not the three-dimensional. To do it, would be nesting and multi-dimensional. But there is a way to think about a kind of a flow of start with materialistic theories, which is obviously the largest one. We have like 10 subcategories in materialism: philosophical, neurobiological, electromagnetic, computational, homeostatic and effective, embodied and inactive theories, relationship theories, representative theories. Language was a complicated one. I actually didn't have that originally. The reviewer suggested that I add that. I had it marginally because it's not really a theory of consciousness, but it's added as well. And then phylogenetically. So all of those very rich for materialism. But then there are other categories. Non-reductive materialism is a quantum theories. Under quantum theories is very interesting. I have traditionally been a major skeptic of quantum. Now that maybe that's my neurophysiological background, that you see what's happening at the synapse and presynapse and postsynapse and the integration of inhibition, and that just seems to be the way things work. And quantum theories in the cell versus quantum theories in my electrical probe or in my brain, well, it didn't seem to matter. I have to say that in doing this paper, I've become more appreciative of quantum theories because there's a great variety of what are called quantum theories, operating at different levels and in different ways. There's a very substantial variety, and I've actually become more appreciative of what that could mean. And then, obviously, panpsychism, monisms, dualisms, idealism. Under idealisms, I have a lot of religious traditions. And then a category I wanted to develop, which dealt with theories that are motivated by psi research. Paranormal, I know paranormal is a larger category. Psi research. You and I have worked together a little bit on this, and we now have the term anomalous cognition that we like. So anomalous and then altered states, because meditation, psychedelics, these are areas that people think can enlighten consciousness. And there are different opinions, and I present both of them. So that's sort of a category. And then I still had a lot of theories that were more challenging or uncertain about how to deal with that. So I put a final category called challenge theories, which deal with some of the Colin McGinn's so-called Mysterianism. That's not his term, but that maybe we'll never be able to understand our own mental capacity is not able to understand consciousness. So different ways of thinking about consciousness that are different than any of these categories. And then I deliberately left to the end integrated information theory, which is obviously fascinating, controversial in recent months due to some pushback by some scientists and philosophers back and forth. You've engaged in that conversation, but that was very difficult to classify because of its nature. And so I have that in a separate category. I don't have it in a separate category to make it more important. I have it in a separate category because it would be detrimental to put it in any other category. So whereas a global workspace has a very natural place in a neurobiological theory under materialism, because that's what it is, and very natural. And integrated information theory is its own category. It doesn't mean integrated information theory is better, or I'm giving it more credit. I'm just using this as a classification scheme. I also make the point in the paper that the amount of space devoted to each theory is not related to its importance, its likelihood of success, or my opinion about it. It's just the capacity to explain it. And sometimes an obscure theory, which is maybe on the edges, takes more space to explain how it works. So I hope people understand that I say a work in process permanently. That this is not a dictate. It's not set in concrete. It's a flexible way of being able to understand where things are and to see the entire field of consciousness in sort of one gestalt understanding, and to place different ideas and to see how they articulate together. So it's been a very exciting adventure, and again, I appreciate working together on helping me navigate it.
Yes, yes. This is a gift. It's not a landscape of consciousness. I think it's a gift because, and by the way, we'll put the link in the chat about because some people may be wondering where can they read it. But you see these two examples.
I understand it's still incomplete. It hasn't been proofread. There are spelling errors. They put it online before I approved it, but it is what it is.
Yes.
To their credit, they like to get, when things are approved, they like to get things online in the scientific world, and it allows for feedback. And so the final version, real version, will be within a couple of months. So if you look at it now, please come back in 2 months and look at it again.
And people are thirsty for it, and surely you're receiving a lot of emails. We were joking before starting. I remember that quote about theories of consciousness are like toothbrushes. Everybody has their own and nobody so it wants to use one another's. So you'll be getting a lot of toothbrushes in the mail. But in any case, it speaks to your courage that, for instance, mentioning IIT, that you're not going to bend to scientific correctness and saying, well, in order to balance things, let me put it in a way so that the other guys, the blue team or the red team, think that I'm putting. No, I mean, I'm just trying to do the things to the most honest and
it's idiosyncratic. I'm not saying my landscape or my structure is the right way, and it's purely idiosyncratic. It's something that I feel comfortable with putting out, and I've put out, and I've had corrections. You've corrected some things, and I've appreciated. I mean, that's the type of feedback that I'm looking for. But ultimately, this is not a committee. Ultimately, I take full responsibility for making this my thing. I've taken what I believe is the best thinking from others, and put it. Am I convinced this is right? Of course not. But what I am convinced of, or what I insist upon, this is the best I can do at this time. And if I achieve that, even if things are wrong or criticized, then I'm perfectly happy. And I'm not happy yet. Still working on it. Not happy yet, but I will be when it's finished. That this is the best I can do now. It's almost there, but not
I'm
quite.
very happy, I must say, because apart from the usual pop stars, and I say it with respect and in some also sarcastic way, I also see some of my heretical friends, living heretical friends, and some of those who are not with us anymore. And it gives me joy that, they can all have a little room in this big house you're building. So thank you for doing that.
Well, I'm trying to do the best we can, and I agreed with what you said originally, that you know, there are many superstars obviously on the list. All this is the natural people you'd expect are all there, but there are some some people have never heard of, and a few, a very few came over the transom, as you can imagine, on because we've been in Closer Truth so long. Every week, literally, I get 2 to 3 very elaborate papers, 80 to 500 pages on a theory. Usually the theory is about cosmology, why the Big Bang is wrong, or on consciousness, and consciousness can be a materialistic kind of view, or it can be a spiritual point of view, but 2 to 3 a week, or literally over 15 years. So, hundreds I have. I try to skim all of them. Some I've engaged with, and not a few, more than a handful, have been very interesting. And there are a few of those represented on the landscape. People have never heard of, who have an idea that I'm not saying is right. I'm saying it's original enough. It has an internal coherence enough to hit some kind of arbitrary standard that I think this will. This is an interesting way to think about it, that maybe we didn't think of. At least I hadn't thought of that before, and so I wanted to include it for that reason. And so I've tried to be able to do this, to make this an open forum where people can contribute, and I have a number of those that would be or beyond the fringe of traditional philosophy as well as traditional science.
Yes. I'm a theoretician by training, so I absolutely adore reading about theories, but I wonder, what about the experiments? Because at the end of the day, and I'm thinking of this representation of all of them, I'm imagining certain experiments, certain phenomena can immediately just send to the bin 80 of those theories, right? So are you concerned about, and I'm not, by the way, obsessed with refutation and the idea that, no, theories can serve other purposes, for instance, imagination, right? But at the end of the day, most of them, if not all of them, will be totally wrong.
Yeah, okay. Let's unpack everything you said, because you said a lot of important things together. But first of all, I set the purpose of this paper as not to do analysis. That what I do is present what I think is the totality of ideas. That's the goal. It can never be perfect. The totality of ideas, and as much as possible from the people who are doing it themselves, as I curate it and as I edit it to make it clear what they're saying. So that's the purpose, to see this totality. In no way do I criticize anything other than, and in some points, just to clarify what they're saying, but not to critique it. So that's number one. Number two, no doubt what you're saying is true, that there are experiments that can falsify or certainly degrade the likelihood of certain theories. But actually, those would only apply logically to those that are susceptible to the scientific method. I mean, it's almost a tautology, because many of these do not. Maybe that's a reason why they should be thrown out ab initio. Just get rid of them, because they're not falsifiable. They're not susceptible to the scientific method. So I reject that view. I reject the view that says that anything it cannot be considered if it doesn't it's not subject to the scientific method. I think there are areas of knowledge that are away from that. I mean, just take psi work as a very controversial example. On both sides of that debate, you have absolute certainty that the statistical data, 10 sigmas or whatever, show that it absolutely exists. And then on the other side, you have a very large, number of scientists and philosophers who think it just can't exist. It's just impossible, and it's illusion, delusion, experimental error. a pre-selection bias, post-data bias. Oh, yeah, a million reasons why it's all wrong. And I've dealt with a parapsychology psi on Closer to Truth. We never address that issue. We never try to adjudicate one side or the other, because there are smart people on both sides, and I'm not smart enough to be the arbiter of that. What I can do, and what we do, is to say, what are the implications if it's true? I'm not saying it's true, but if it is, what are the implications? What are the implications to the laws of physics? Is it independent law? Is it electromagnetic? What are the implications? What are the different theories how it could work? That's the interesting kind of question. And so with psi, it occurs to me, if it is right, if there's anything right about it, certainly 99 point whatever percent of the anecdotes may be easily explainable by other means. But if anything is right about it, what does it mean? It certainly is not reproducible as other areas of science. That's for sure. And so is it susceptible to the scientific method? That would be on the border. Certainly, Hinduism's consciousness, which is very sophisticated, is not susceptible to the scientific method. But that doesn't mean I'm going to exclude it. So I think we have to be careful about what we say can be excluded. Anil Seth and Tim Bain had a very good review article on materialistic theories of consciousness, which I quote, and they have a wonderful statement in there. They said, as we've learned more and more neuroscience over these decades, you would think that the number of theories would get narrower and narrower. And what's happening is they're getting broader and more as we learn more. So to me, that's a very telling remark.
We're running out of time, and I'm slightly disagreeing and gently biting my tongue, because I think on the psi issue, I must just say it, and then I'll ask you maybe a final question. Of course, I'll give you the chance to reply if you wish. But on the psi issue, of course, absolute certainty is never good. But the distinction between those who claim that there's statistical evidence, clear evidence that these phenomena do happen, and to those that, in a way, dogmatically deny it, it would be like geologists telling virologists that they got it right. I mean, often those who deny the existence aren't working on it, or don't know most of the literature. They've never done an experiment themselves. It's really controversial, but I lean more on the other side, because I'm really scientifically and experientially interested in this phenomena. And it's so unfair, even when you present both of them as well, everybody has a say, because the psi communities they have our flaws, but it's been suffering a lot from this kind of ruthless dogmatism. And yet it's true. I mean, there's so many things we don't know, including, and this is fascinating, to what extent do these phenomena lend themselves to the usual rules of science in the laboratory? So it's all more mystery, more questions. But I think there are clear evidences there. And well, science is also a socio-political business, and it requires consensus, and it requires many aspects, not just theory and experiment. But anyways, thank you for including those there. I think you do a service to both communities, those who think they exist and those who think they cannot possibly exist.
Yeah, and again, I take that as a fact that there is that, and that category I use not to discern whether psi is right or not. No. It says that if you do believe in psi, which I respect, what are the theories of consciousness that emerge from it? And so in that category, we have a vast diversity of people of ideas about consciousness, but all of them in that category are motivated from their belief in psi.
Yes.
And that's why, by the way, I should say that before I did my doctorate in neurophysiology at UCLA Brain Research Institute, I had been communicating with J.B. Ryan at Duke, and he invited me to do a PhD with him. So it's not that I am anti-psi, and I almost did that. In retrospect, I'm happy I didn't, but it's an important area of investigation. I think we would agree on that, and I include it, in a top category in the way to think about consciousness. It is an important contribution.
Yes. but an obvious but often forgotten thing. We want to know more about it, no less. So people, we want to know less about it. No, we want to know more. All right, we're at the time. I'll just take 3 or 4 minutes from the Q&A to ask you about your relationship to China and this medal you received. And if that wasn't easy enough to answer in a few minutes, then please take your time. Also to say something about the Kuhn Foundation, because these are other aspects of your work, and I'd like to know about these other endeavors you pursue. I'm very interested in China, because let me put it this way. We hear a lot about China, but I think we don't really know what's going on there. And we tend to portray it as some sort of weird enemies. And that's probably very unfair, being mindful of what's going on there politically. But, this is sensible. But again, we should be able to speak about it and educate ourselves as to what's going on with China, because they're also they're our neighbors in the planet. So, well, congratulations for having received that medal. It's quite extraordinary. Please tell us about it.
Let give you short answers to the question. First of all, the Kuhn Foundation is a very small foundation, which I founded when I was able to sell my investment banking business 24 or 5 years ago. And we took, it's not enormous amounts of money, but a small amount of money. Rather than buying a boat or something, we put it in this little foundation, and that has been the primary funder of Closer to Truth. When I did it, I had this vague vision. I didn't know what, but that's basically Kuhn Foundation. We've done a few other things to support various charitable activities, but the vast majority has been supporting Closer to Truth during these years. And obviously, I never take any compensation personally whatsoever, nor does any family member. So that's a simple answer. China's a more complicated answer. I would only say this, that my interest and activities in China is now 35 years, is a grafted on passion, consciousness, brain, mind, foundations of physics. These are lifelong, deep passions that are endemic to who I am. China was totally due to the capriciousness of the world. I was invited in the late 1980s by one of my mentors in the U.S. to a conference in China, because I was an investment banker and a scientist in the first reform of the science industries, which began in the late 80s. It was a late part of the reform, so I was invited there. And it's obviously a long story. I won't go into it, but that became sort of a business avocation. And then after I sold my business, became more of a direct vocation. And I had the opportunity to do many things in media. I wrote the biography of the former president of China, Jiang Zemin, which was a 4-year project that became the best-selling book in China. And it was censored in the Chinese language. It was not censored in English. That's my relationship. Anything I say or write outside of China, I do commentaries on BBC, CNN, etc., are never censored, never questioned whatsoever. But anything that they republish in China, they will censor. But the rule is very simple. They can take anything out that they want. I mean, I'm not happy about it, but they do it. But they can't add anything. They can't put words in my mouth. And I have gotten to know China very well. I've had several books, a new one coming out in a few months this year, focusing on Xi Jinping's policies. And so I've had the opportunity to tell a rich story about China. There are many problems in China, and I discuss all of that. But there are many things that have been achieved that are really underappreciated. The anti-poverty campaign, which had 2 parts. One is the general economic growth has brought 800 million people out of poverty by economic growth. But since Xi Jinping took over and he focused on anti-poverty, he has made, for example, to give a different view, he has made the comment that fighting poverty is the single most important thing that he does, more important than anything else. is, and he has focused more time and more energy on that. And in China's authoritarian top-down system, when he says that, then everybody has to conform to that. And although there may be simplistic exaggerations, they've made enormous progress. The last 100 million people who were brought out of extreme poverty, they're still poor relative, obviously, to urban areas, but brought out of extreme poverty. One of the definitions, for example, is a flush toilet. That even if your income is a certain level, you don't have a flush toilet, you're still extremely poor. So China's made an enormous effort in that direction. Because this final 100 million people, even if economic growth would continue on a national scale, they would not be able, they would still be poor because they're in mountainous areas, remote villages, or minority populations, whatever it is. So that's an example of something that's underappreciated. And we all, as human beings, have a tendency to see the other in a homogeneous fashion, where we see what's close to us in a very heterogeneous, very granular way, but we see somebody else very homogeneous. And that's not the case. We are all the same. Each society has its own granularity. And what I've tried to do is to tell a balanced story about China, and have appreciated the opportunity to do so, and it was recognized by this medal in telling what I believe to be an honest story. I'm not saying it's perfect, and I certainly deal with all of China's problems, but when we, as you said, we're on this globe together. China's 20% of the population. I mean, if you go back 40 years, China had, in terms of GDP of the world, it was barely over 1% of the world. Today, or it's approaching 20%. It's probably 18%. Based on the exchange rate, it might have fallen back in the last couple of years, but it's certainly in that, it's gone from roughly 1% to 17, 18% of the global economy. And the people are very industrious and desirous of a better life. That's what we all do, and it's important for everybody on the globe to understand the feelings and activities of everyone else. So I'm happy to make a small contribution in that area. And it is, totally different world than what I do in brain, mind, consciousness. The two have absolutely nothing to do with one another.
Well, it is another example of sincerity and depth, if I may say so. And these are qualities we badly need. So thank you. And I'm sorry for the audience because I took a little bit of your time. So if you don't mind, let's open it up for Q&A. Thank you very much.
Yes. We're going to go through the queue. Aaron had his hand up about a half an hour ago. So Aaron, if you could unmute yourself, I'll add a spotlight to you. Aaron Sloman.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, right. Well, I'd just like to say that, first of all, thanks very much for your presentations. We nearly talked a couple of years ago when you were here in Birmingham in England, where I am. And that didn't happen. And
you know why? Because of Mr. COVID.
Yeah.
Our whole crew got COVID.
And since then, I've had some revelations by thinking about biology in a new way, new to me anyway, by thinking about how things might have started. And a whole collection of clues led me to the notion that in brains, synapses are the things that are most important, and that the neurons are only there to help the synapses collaborate, whereas the general theory is the other way around, that the neurons do all the work and the synapses help the neurons to collaborate. And this idea that the synapses are basic comes from the notion that the earliest organisms were small single-celled organisms, which were eventually developed the ability to reproduce, and then later developed the ability to reproduce sexually. And I'm suggesting that those ancient single-celled organisms are the ancestors of synapses,
Mm.
and that the as I say, the neurons evolved later. Now I put in the chat window a link to a web page, but if anyone wants to search for it, I've got a file online, which I'll repost again, in which I'm trying to assemble a huge amount of biological evidence, lots of papers, videos, and assembling it in a way that's manageable is very difficult, especially as my brain's sliding downhill at age 87. And I would welcome help with that process. But for now, I'll just say that if anyone wants to know more, I will repost the link in the chat window to everyone in a few minutes. But I just want to say that there's one example, that the processes of metamorphosis, where an insect starts off coming out of an egg and grows and eats vegetable matter, and then it goes into a cocoon or a pupa and disassembles part of what was there before and reassembles new things using the chemical matter that's been obtained, is just an absolutely amazing process. So you end up with something that comes out and can fly, which could never fly before. And it's got a whole lot of new physiology. You can go to flower, and it's got a way of getting nectar from a flower, putting its tongue into the nectar. It didn't have that previously. But it's not just got the new physiology, it's got the new capabilities, which it didn't have previously. And I think those biological, essentially almost miraculous transformations are clues to some of the richness and complexity of the biochemistry and the underlying physics of the world we live in. And I suspect that there are things in current theoretical physics that may not be able to explain that. The theoretical physics may need to be extended to accommodate these phenomena.
Yeah, I would say, Aaron, that you've made remarkable contributions during your remarkable career to many different aspects of computation and new ways of thinking about biology. So anything you say, I would take very, very seriously. Your recent work in biology and in postulating that some of the things that we think are very obvious, like the embryological process you're talking about, embed such astonishing kinds of mechanisms that they may exceed our current ways of postulating the laws of physics. So I admire that. I think it needs a great hearing and very similar to consciousness. It's just new ways of looking at the structure of the world that you've been a great pioneer in. So I commend you for it. I can't comment on the veracity of it, but I love the fact that you are courageous and creative enough to develop these ideas.
I've just reposted the link into the chat window.
Thank you.
Great. Thanks so much, Aaron. Okay, next, Veronica.
Thank you. Thank you to both of you. Dr. Kuhn, something that I find particularly pleasant and I highly admire is the way in which you corner, or sometimes even put in a box, as it were, those super brilliant people that you interview. And I always wonder, and don't get me wrong, if it's all spontaneous or if it's sort of choreographed, whereby you know in advance what the questions and the topics are, and then you do the editing, or is it really, really spontaneous between the two of you? Because it really looks real. I mean, when you watch the video, it doesn't look like there was any preparation, or staging about it.
Yeah, great question. I can tell you this: for every interview I do, I study very hard, and I try to fool myself. This is my object, into thinking that during the interview, you know, I'm going to be the one interviewed about this person's idea. So I better be prepared to answer the questions. I have to get myself to that level of confidence. I'm fooling myself. And I hope for, you know, 2-3 hours, I can be able to appear like I know that person's material. There've been some funny stories where, you know, I would study somebody who wrote a book on, you know, 7 ideas about X or Y. I'm not going to mention specifics. And they wrote that book, say, 10 years ago. Now, I just read the book, you know, last night, and I know those 10 ideas. And then I'll ask the person about the ideas, and they have, you know, they forgot the order, and I have to correct their order. So I prepare a lot for that. I have a list of questions in my mind. When we do the actual taping, it will be, you know, often a half day, but it might be 12 or 15 different segments, each one, you know, 8 to 10, 12 minutes. And for each one, before we start, I'll review that topic that we'll be talking about. So it'll be really fresh in my mind. So I'm ready. But then we have the 2 versions. One is the raw videos, which are just these videos that we put on YouTube and every other place. We have 5,000. And those are absolutely real. I mean, there's no choreography other than my preparation. It's very natural. Again, if I make a mistake and I say something wrong, we don't edit that out. You know, we'll edit out if there's a camera failure, but that's the only thing that we'll do. So those are very real. When we do the television shows, that's very scripted. Now, the television shows, the episodes, and on our website or on YouTube, it's very clear which of the episodes. That's a very structured, very, very idiosyncratic. It's my architecture of the idea. We're taking out of a 12-minute video, we're taking 2 or 3 minutes, very edited, very carefully, and I put a storyline behind it that I'm telling a story. And generally, it's not coming up with, you know, an answer. It's coming up with understanding deeply the nature of the question, because it's different points of view. So it's very different. So the episodes, the 27-minute, of which there are, you know, 300, are absolutely planned and scripted and thought out and very meticulously done, worrying about every word. The interviews themselves are purely spontaneous.
Well, that's amazing, especially because you must be jet lagged sometimes.
You know, I say the opposite. I'm always jet lagged because, you know, if I'm working with China, I'm working on the consciousness paper, I'm doing it all night. So, you know, I'm in a perennial state of jet lag, and so I don't notice it. I don't notice it anymore.
Okay, thank you so much.
But what I do is I play a lot of table tennis, seriously, and that sort of gets my body rhythm. And that's my form of meditation. I don't do meditation. Maybe I should, but I play intense table tennis, and that seems to do it for me.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for the question.
Great. Thanks so much, Veronica. And next, I'd like to bring in Carlos. If you could unmute yourself, I will add spotlight to you.
Thank you very much. The question I have is that being you in contact with so many interesting people, are you concluding that there is and having in mind your last name, are you aware of a paradigmatic change that could change our views on some issues that really could change the problems that we are having?
Yeah, you know, Thomas Kuhn is not a known relative, but when I was at MIT, I did meet him and audited a course that he was taking, and we discovered that we each had a grandfather who came from Hungary. So maybe we were,
as mine.
maybe we were related, you know, 10 generations ago. It's a good question, and I would say that the first way I answer it is that the nature and richness of these questions are becoming more part of the public square. And it's not just what we do. I mean, a lot of people are doing that. Àlex does a terrific job in Parry Center. I mean, we're all contributing to this activity. Maybe it's part of the noosphere. That's been an area that we've worked with people in the noosphere. It just had its 100th anniversary, and we're developing a series in cooperation with that there's the sort of global mind that is developing. So I think that is a good change, and it's the nature of the technology and our ability to do this, to communicate, that those people who have always wondered about these questions are now more connected together, and by doing so, making a bigger noise about it, other people who might not have ordinarily been interested in this are coming on to are appreciating these questions more significantly. So just the appreciation of the importance of the kinds of questions we're asking, it will make a small difference. Will it make a big difference in the world? Will it overwhelm the nationalistic tendencies that we all have towards adherence to the group and the demonization of the other? That's such a powerful evolutionary baked instinct in human beings. I'm not necessarily optimistic, but I am committed to do my small part in making these questions more relevant and more important, and hopefully that can make some difference. But I can't tell you I'm a wild optimist.
Thank you.
Un abrazo, Carlos.
Hola.
Great. Thank you so much, Carlos. And we have time for maybe one more question. Roy was trying to get through with a hand raise function. So Roy, if you could unmute yourself so that you pop to the top, and I will add there we go. I'll add you to spotlight for your question.
Just to be presumptuous, I'm just going to ask when you're going to interview me.
Okay, well, I mean, we have a long list, but send me a suggestion and be happy to put it on our list.
All my stuff, just go over my stuff. I maybe suggest that I be the final interview, because it'll all be revealed at that time and you won't be able to continue on.
Okay, all right. Well,
I really appreciate your objective looking into my theory. I really appreciate your objective perspective. That's all I have to say.
Okay, terrific.
Great, thank you.
Great. Thanks so much, Roy. Àlex, do we have time for one more question? I've got a few announcements at the end. Or
are you okay? We go for one more, Robert?
One more?
Sure.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
So, Mr. McIntyre, you have your hand raised at Rogers. If you could, you're next in the queue. So,
okay. Are we unmuted?
We can hear you.
Can you hear me? Okay. Yes. These issues can become very, very complex. But I think I go back to the question, which was, I think, originally Leibniz's question: why is there something rather than nothing? Taken up very seriously by Heidegger. And these are simple questions. These are very simple questions. Their value is that they put us in a mind state which puts us somewhere different and gives our minds a kind of deep and maybe metaphysical dimension. I'll let you stick with that simplicity just for a moment. In that, a number of years ago, I had a cup of coffee with a very high Buddhist Lama who was a friend of mine. And I asked him a simple question. I said, Kenshin, if we were joined here in this cup of coffee with an astronomer and a cosmologist, would you tell them that this whole universe is generated out of the deep base of mind? And he said, yes, but not right away. And I think we dwell in that not right away. In that we're on a path from, and I think it was actually Roy who mentioned this in the chat, in the difference between consciousness, which is always a consciousness of, and awareness in and of itself. And I think that's really the journey that we're on, is to get from consciousness to the awareness of awareness, if we could put it in that way, which I think would maybe classically be described as enlightenment. The difference that makes, in the course of this conversation, I said, well, the Buddha taught that there were other civilizations and aliens and all of that sort of stuff. He said, yes, he did. I said, how do we deal with that? He said, well, if they're awakened, then no matter what our bodies are like, no matter what degree of civilization we have, our minds will be the same. And I'm thinking about, what Lawrence is talking about in terms of an interreligious philosophy. How do we get to the point where our minds will be the same? And it seems to me that we do that insofar as we make the journey from consciousness of to awareness as it is in itself. Comment.
Appreciate the remarks. Articulates obviously with many different theories, mostly under idealism. You differentiate between consciousness and awareness. Each term has its own peculiarities and meanings that people put on it. The way you've done it, awareness is a more content-free kind of term. Consciousness would have different elements of content in it as well. So I mean, that differentiation is a legitimate one, and those people who seek the enlightenment move from the specific aspects of consciousness to this general concept of awareness. That is a worldview. It's not the only worldview. There are many others. It's a worldview that is obviously believed by many people, and certainly needs to be taken seriously. But I would not tell you now that that's a goal that I think everyone should have. I don't know that to be the case. I think it's an important contribution to our ways of thinking, but it is not something that I set as my life goal to do that, even though I know that other people think it should be.
Great. Thanks so much to both of you. And now, Àlex, and do you have any more questions to wrap up before we go into our announcements? Or Robert, any bookends?
Gratitude to all of you, especially to Robert. And just to say that the future mind, as I see it, it has to do with the evolution of consciousness. And I think what you, Robert, are providing is a deluxe shelter, a meeting point, so that we can continue this evolutionary ascent. So again, thank you for doing that.
It's a pleasure, Àlex. We are kindred spirits.
Great. Thank you both so much. Before we wrap up this first session of Future Mind, we do have a few announcements before we go. This series, Future Mind series, continues on Wednesday, February 28th, and I'll have a conversation between Christoph Koch and Àlex Gómez-Marín. So please visit the website to sign up as you did for this one. The next installment of our Book a Month Club series will take place on Thursday, February 15th. So it's before the next session of Future Mind, where Jonathan Alday will go over Quantum Questions, Mystical Writings of the World's Great Physicists. And this is a book edited by Ken Wilber. And we are also happy to announce that our June in-person events are now available for registration. June 4th through the 11th, Consciousness for Real, Towards a New Science of Human Experience. Speakers Eddie Bilmoria, Michael Bitbull, Monica Gagliano, Marcello Massimini on Zoom, Pablo Pilankin, Jonathan Rowson, Vandana Shiva, and Marjorie Wollicott. And this is curated and chaired by Àlex. And then June 13th through the 20th, so we have a gap day. And then that next week, we have Gentle Action, a gathering of shared experience, a week of living in the moment for the moment. Both events are taking place in Pari, Italia. And for more information, please visit the Pari Center website at https://paricenter.com. Thank you all so much, and we look forward to seeing you soon here again.